Alright guys, today I'll be giving you my top 10 coasters that were L's and W's. I will be doing this in a format where I go over number 10 in the L's and then number 10 in the W's and so on and so forth. This is definitely an interesting video as I am including both coasters that I have ridden and re-rode this year and new credits. Both of those will be in the mix, so without further ado, let's get into this ranking. Starting off the list of L's, coming in at number 10 is Batman the Ride at Six Flags Over Georgia. Now, I expected this to be about on par with what it actually was for me, but I still had that thought in the back of my mind that everyone said this one's way better than all the others. And lo and behold, this was not significantly better than the others. It is my number one Batman clone, but they are back to back to back in my rankings. This is still a top 100 coaster for me, but just wasn't quite what people said it was. Coming in at number 10 is Hulk at Islands of Adventure. This is a ride that was more intense than I thought it would be. I've heard mixed things on how intense it actually was. Some said it was more intense than Kumba, but for the most part, people said Kumba was more intense, but I definitely didn't think so. That launch is a top 5 launch for me, and the rest of the layout is extremely punchy. The second half does fizzle out a little bit, but I don't care. The first part of the ride is world class. Number 9 for the L's is Cobra's Curse at Busch Gardens Tampa. If you know me, you know I'm a huge fan of spinning coasters. I mean, Whirlwind's in my top 50, but this thing really didn't do anything. It's very bland, very mild, and the theming's pretty good, but it's definitely not enough to carry it. Number 9 for the W's is my second most ridden coaster this year, and that is Predator. Oh my god, this thing was absolutely flying this year. It got more Titan Track, and I tell you, those camelbacks that got Titan Track are giving mad ejector. You're getting pretty much RMC level ejector on those two camelbacks this year. If you're in the front on a good day, you do have to ride this on a good day, but if you do, you are in for a world-class ride experience with phenomenal laterals and phenomenal airtime. Coming in at number 8 for the L's is Blue Streak at Cedar Point. I was definitely hoping for bigger things out of this wooden coaster. I'm also a pretty big fan of older classic wooden coasters, and I hadn't ridden this in 8 years prior to riding this year, but I was definitely let down when I found weak airtime, not a whole lot of force to it, just a pretty mediocre ride experience, nothing much else to it. Coming in at number 8 for the W's is Wild Eagle at Dollywood. This is another one that I rode prior to this past visit, and this one was actually in 2023, so very recent. And I gotta tell you, the difference between 2024 and 2023 was big. Maybe it was just my expectations being set right this time, but Wild Eagle was actually a powerhouse. There were positive G's that I do not remember being there. I don't know if it was just running really fast or if it was just in my head the last time and I was trying to convince myself that it wasn't good because it's B&M, but I definitely grayed out on both my rides on this. And that first drop is definitely one of the better ones B&M's done, even compared to some B&M Hypers. I do like this more than a couple B&M Hyper first drops. Wild Eagle is a much better wing coaster than Gatekeeper in my opinion. Coming in at number 7 for the L's is another coaster at Cedar Point, and this is Valravn. Now, I didn't have very high expectations going back into Valravn because I rode it in 2021, and I thought it was mid, but oh my god, was it even more mid this time. This is the definition of a nothing ride. You have nothing on that first drop, which is really sad, because SheiKra and Griffin give good airtime, and the rest of the layout is very bland. The rest of the layout doesn't do anything either, and it's a real shame, because I rode SheiKra and Griffin prior to re-riding this in 2024, and it just wasn't even close. I mean, those are leagues ahead of Valravn. Coming in at number 7 for the W's is Big Bear Mountain at Dollywood. This is by far the best family coaster I have been on. It is amazing how all these elements give good floater and good laterals, and yet are still fun despite not being that intense. I usually like balls to the wall intense rides, but this is just a pure fun one that's still top 40 worthy for me. It's got some of the best theming ever, amazing onboard audio, and it's just one of the most pure fun experiences on any coaster. At number 6 for the L's is Tennessee Tornado, another Dollywood coaster. Dollywood definitely had a lot of coasters that got shooken up in my rankings, and Tennessee Tornado is definitely one of them. This and Wild Eagle sort of switched in my rankings. I thought Wild Eagle was kind of good, not great before, and Tennessee Tornado was great. Now it's the opposite. Tennessee Tornado still has a great drop. I do like Eagles more, but then the rest of the layout is really short. That's my big takeaway from this trip, is there's not a lot to it. It is intense, but honestly, I don't even think it's more intense than Wild Eagle. It's got good stuff, yes, but I definitely don't think it's one of the greatest arrows of all time. Coming in at number 6 for the W's is Wild Mouse at Cedar Point. I know we've done a lot of Cedar Point and Dollywood so far. I swear, the next 2 picks will not be Cedar Point and Dollywood. This ride really shocked me. The only reason it's as low as it is I know I probably got extremely lucky on this ride. I had me and another bigger adult on one side and 2 really small children on the other side. So we spun maybe more than I've ever spun on any amusement ride. I could have spun more on this than I have on some teacup rides. I really wish someone got an off-ride video of me on that ride. It was bonkers, to say the least. And again, I know I probably got lucky there. It's usually not like that. I've seen that it's usually not like that. But I don't care. That's my one experience on this ride, is the most insane spinning on any spinning coaster I've gotten. The layout's fine. It's not too special. You get some good laterals here and there, and a little bit of positive G's, but I think those were just amplified a lot more because of the spinning. The centripetal forces were insane. The laterals were just that much more apparent when you were already pinned to the side of the seat and then you get thrown a bit harder. There's a reason this is over 2 of the 8 B&M Hypers I've been on in my rankings, and that is because the one ride I got on it was just berserk. Number 5 for the L's is Hagrid's at Islands of Adventure. This is definitely not better than Big Bear Mountain in my opinion. Most people consider this easily the best family coaster of all time. I would definitely beg to differ. This is a fun ride, don't get me wrong, it's in my top 100, but it's just not that forceful. There's plenty of people who claim that this thing has great laterals, fun airtime, all that stuff. I didn't really get too much of that. This ride is mainly about the theming, and yeah, it's got nice theming, but I don't think it's as good as some people say. Honestly, I like the Bears theming more, I'm not gonna lie. Big Bear's actually fun. It's a story that makes sense. It's a story that I'm gonna want to hear multiple times. This is just Hagrid yapping on about some creatures. There's no cohesion in the story. I mean, there sort of is. You're looking for creatures and then you get lost in the dark forest, but like, it's kind of stupid. And Hagrid's not exactly the type of guy that I want to hear narrating my whole journey for this thing. I'd much rather hear Ned Oakley. So coming in at number 5 for the W's is Pipeline the Surf Coaster at SeaWorld Orlando. This ride absolutely blew me away. I expected this to be good, but I definitely didn't see myself liking it as much as I did. This thing is so bizarre. This is one of the weirdest coasters you will ever ride, but I love it. The airtime you get on this varies from OK Floater to OK Ejector, and I know OK Ejector doesn't seem like it'll cut it for a top 25 spot on my list, but the way you get Ejector is so weird. It's not like anything else, even compared to Georgia Scorcher. It just doesn't seem right. The way you fly up out of the seat, you don't really get the airtime. Your seat gets the airtime, and you come with the seat. And there's no way to really explain that until you actually get on this ride. This is one of the only coasters that gives me butterflies, and I think that's definitely worth a top 25 spot and a top 5 spot in the W's rankings. Coming in at number 4 for the L's is unfortunately Hurricane at Fun Spot Atlanta. I hate that I have to do this to Fun Spot Atlanta, the best park in the world, but I mean, it's okay. I get that most people see this and think it's going to be a 5 out of 10 coaster, but a few of my friends were really hyping this up to be an amazing ride, and I believed them for some reason. You know, they're right on some things, they're miserably wrong on other things, but I believed them for this one, and they were, of course, wrong again. I was definitely let down by this. I only got one ride on it because why the hell would I go for a second ride on this when I could, go over to the greatest thing of all time? But I was met with some okay laterals and okay airtime. Definitely a 5 out of 10 ride, nothing offensive, but it's definitely not even close to what I was expecting, unfortunately. So coming in at number 4 for the W's list is Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia, which is by far the best B&M I have ever ridden. I expected this to be a mid-tier, maybe upper-tier B&M hyper. I definitely didn't think it would beat Nitro, but oh my god, let me tell you, this thing is an absolute animal. If you've heard me talk about this ride on the channel before, you know that I think this has the single most intense moment of any coaster for positives with that downwards helix. This is the only element to date that has made me black out. It is bonkers. You can't describe the feeling of blacking out in a matter of seconds until you actually experience it, and then you gain back all your senses while you're out of your seat experiencing airtime, and it's good airtime. That is the other strong point of this ride, is it actually has ejector, and it's strong RMC level ejector. Okay, the first half is okay, but the second half absolutely kicks it into high gear. You are getting violent ejector on these hills. It is absolutely the best B&M I've been on, and I don't see any other B&M topping it unless they can get their act together and stop building family coasters. Coming in at number 3 for the L's is another one I've already ridden, and this is Thunderhead at Dollywood. This was unfortunate because it was a top 25 coaster for me last year. In fact, it was number 20, but it definitely fell from grace a bit for me. I feel like it was definitely too smooth this year. There definitely wasn't enough bite, and I feel like a lot of the airtime moments that were ejector last year were floater this year for some reason. I don't know why, but for some reason it just felt a bit weaker, There's nothing too wrong about this ride. It's still a borderline top 50 coaster for me. Really, I'm still deciding whether I want to put this in my top 50 or not, but it's nowhere near as extreme as I remember it being in 2023. Coming in at number 3 for the W's is the last new credit on the W's list, and this is again at Six Flags Over Georgia, being Georgia Scorcher. Is this anywhere near as good as Pipeline? No. But I had expectations going into Pipeline. I had expectations going into Hulk and Goliath. I had no expectations going into Georgia Scorcher. I did, but they were just like, yeah, it's going to be a whatever ride. You know what I mean when I say no expectations. This thing ended up being better than 5 of the 8 B&M hypers I've ever ridden. This landed a spot in my top 50. It's not like Thunderhead where I'm back and forth. It's definitely not high in my top 50, but it's in my top 50. And this was a lower tier B&M stand-up by the looks of it that would probably not even be top 150. This ride has some mad airtime. It's got floater, it's even got a couple moments of ejector, which, like I said with Pipeline, is insane in the standing position. It's not as insane as Pipeline because the seat doesn't move up, but it's still really cool. There's some really intense moments, and overall, this is just one of the most underrated coasters I have ever been on, by far. Coming in at number 2 for the L's list is the one all of you expected to see on this list, and that is Steel Vengeance. This is not necessarily a bad ride. In fact, it is a top 15 coaster for me. So it's stupidity to say that I don't like this ride. It's a 9 out of 10 coaster. It's fantastic. It's definitely top 50 in the world. But what makes it one of the most overrated coasters I've ever been on is the fact that so many people not only have this as a top 10 coaster they've ridden, top 3 they've ridden, they have it as the best coaster they've ever ridden, as the greatest coaster of all time, and it's not even close. Half of this ride is floater, and the half that's ejector is okay ejector. It's nothing too special. There's a lot of airtime, but it's not necessarily quality airtime. I'm sorry that I'm ranting on Steel Vengeance again, but it lands itself at number 2 on the L's list. Coming in at number 2 for the W's is Gemini at Cedar Point. Oh my god, this was the same story as Comet at Hershey Park was last year. Hadn't ridden it in 8 years, thought it would be okay, pretty mid, nothing too special, and it knocked my socks off. This is the 4th best ride at Cedar Point. You get violent ejector on a lot of these drops. You get good laterals, not to mention the racing feature is really fun. This is absolutely a must-do every time you go to Cedar Point, and it is a real shame that more people don't appreciate this as the top 50 worthy coaster it is for me. Coming in at number 1 for the L's is one you might not have thought of, but it's Great American Scream Machine at Six Flags Over Georgia. This ride is pathetic beyond all belief. I even thought this had potential to be number 3 in the park. I didn't think it would be necessarily, but it had potential, I thought. This ride is weaker than some kiddie coasters, not even including Cosmos Curves, but like actual weak kiddie coasters. I'm sorry, this is possibly the stupidest ride of all time. And of course, coming in at number 1, this shouldn't really be any sort of surprise. It's Magnum XL 200, and I mean, it's my number 2 overall. It went from not even being in my top 100 due to me thinking it was overhyped and way too rough in 2021 to it having possibly the strongest airtime of all time. I mean, there's nothing to describe how strong this airtime is. You can't explain it until you actually ride it. Now, I do want to shout out Air Force One before I end the video because, yes, Air Force One was a W, but I already went in with expectations that this would be my number 1, so it can't really be too much of a W, but let me know what you guys thought of this ranking down in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.